What's going on, everyone? I'm just out taking a walk. I'm actually in an abandoned lot, or like a roadway, and pretty much a field. I think it's like a lot that's for sale. There's going to be a house here in the background or some type of business being put on here. Anyways, I'm just walking, and I came here for a little bit of privacy and also for the quietness here because the road's pretty loud. So in this video, I'm going to talk about asteroids. I'm going to talk about 4 asteroids in particular. And this video is astrology based. And the reason why I chose this to talk about is because asteroids are not so commonly used in astrology to make predictions and to learn about energies that permeate and happen here with us. You know, astrology is not a prediction. It's a prediction tool, but you know, there's still an element of free will. It's energy. Like if you're going to predict anything, you're predicting energy, but energy doesn't determine anything. It's up to you to be the magician and decide how you want to use that energy. So the free will is definitely a real thing in this, but it's good to know the energy so that you can be a good alchemist and use that energy in your favor as best as you can. So I had a peculiar situation happen to me about a week and a half ago, and I'm making this video now because I had to do some research after I learned about what I learned. And what made me decide to talk about these 4 asteroids. And the 4 asteroids that I'm going to talk about are called, the first one's called Aesculapia. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. The next one is called Panacea. And the next one that I'm going to talk about is called Ops. It's a real simple name and it's hard to remember. Ops. And the last one's called Ceres. Now, if you keep up with astrology and you're trying to learn, you probably know about Ceres. Ceres is commonly put out there through astrologers. Astrologers commonly talk about Ceres and Chiron. Chiron's another very common one. But these are the 4 that I'm going to talk about, and the reason why I'm going to talk about these 4 is because I have a story for you. I'm going to share with you a story of what happened to me about a week and a half ago and what influenced me to even want to find out what these asteroids were all about. And you know, the way I discovered these asteroids, it was a real peculiar situation where, like, in the past I've been curious about asteroids because I'm curious about astrology, and the asteroid information is much harder to find. And there are like millions of asteroids in the cosmos, and you know, there's a huge amount of asteroids that are orbiting our sun, but astrologers only use approximately, I'm thinking like 10 or 20 of them to make astrological predictions, or to track and understand for astrological purposes. And asteroids are a pretty new thing. They've only been used by astrologers for probably like the past 100 or 200 years. Now, the planets have been used by astrologers for a very, very long time, thousands of years, but the asteroids are very new. And even when you think in terms of astronomy, with astronomy and the scientists that, you know, they search and they look for heavenly bodies through astronomy. It's supposed to be, you know, science based. With astronomy, there's millions of asteroids. There's just way too many to keep up with. But I've always thought this, and I still believe it. I feel that the governments or the high institutions that are doing this research and exploring space and looking for these heavenly bodies, and I think they're using it for astrology. I don't think it's just science, and I don't necessarily believe that they're gonna fly to these asteroids or heavenly bodies and do stuff on them. It's a little bit hard to believe and far-fetched. I don't buy the story yet. I need more in order to buy the story. But my belief is that they're gathering information on each of these, and they're tracking historical events, and they are using this information to keep their power and keep their control, and use it as like a governing mechanism or a control mechanism. You know, knowledge is power, and astrology is such a taboo topic nowadays. A lot of people, like, I don't believe it. Some people believe it. Some people say it's sketchy and this type of thing. And then you have the governments and these sophisticated institutions. They just kind of just dismiss it, and it's crazy. It's really unbelievable. I don't understand how this can be just dismissed. And I don't think it's dismissed. I think it's being very, very, very diligently studied, and they're understanding as much as they can, and they're not sharing it with us common people. But anyways, I'm making this video where, you know, I learned about asteroids, and I'm going to share with you information about these 4 asteroids that I just mentioned to you earlier. And the information came to me in a really peculiar way, and you know, I'm going to tell you a story about how the information came to me. And through the story, you'll kind of learn what the asteroids are all about, because the story will help you remember the information, and the situations that happen in the story, the things that happen in the story, kind of explain what the asteroids do and what their powers are. So the story serves like a dual purpose. And at the end of the video, after I tell my personal story, then at the end of the video, I'm going to kind of go in depth and talk about some of the mythology of these asteroids, these 4 asteroids. And you know, mythology is really important. You know, mythology, it seems like it's a myth, so maybe you shouldn't learn it. But when you know mythology about these heavenly bodies, like, for example, you have Mercury. Mercury is a god according to certain myths, and there's a whole story, a whole mythology on Mercury. And Mercury's a god or a person, and he lives his life a certain way. He has a personality. He acts a certain way in certain situations. He acts a certain way when he's around other gods, when he's around a Mars, a Jupiter, a Saturn, a Pluto, a Neptune. So by knowing these mythologies, it kind of tells you how these planets interact with one another in a orbiting or a cosmic setting when we're trying to learn some astrology about them. So at the end of the video, I'm going to share with you a little bit of mythology about these 4 asteroids. I'll say them again, and then I'll just go to the story. The first asteroid is Aesculapia, the second one is Panacea, the third one is Ops, and the 4th one is Ceres. So here's my story. About a week ago, I received an email from a platform that I had invested in. They told me that they were shutting down and that I had to withdraw all of my money and put it in my own custody. I did it a day later in 2 transactions. The first transaction was immediately successful. However, the second transaction stalled for more than a day. Knowing that a transaction usually takes 2 hours maximum to clear, I got worried, and I thought that maybe I had done it wrong and made a mistake and possibly had lost a substantial sum of money. I contacted my transfer platform's customer service and let them know what I did, and I asked them about my proper balance. I told them that it wasn't showing. 2 days went by, and at that point I considered the possibility of having lost all of the money and maybe just accepting that fate, and just maybe I screwed up. I was super frustrated and began trying to think of bright sides or learning points from the situation instead of focusing on the negativity and maybe, you know, things that I did wrong and being too hard on myself. I didn't want the situation to own me. So I firstly went into what was familiar to me, and that was the power of the mind. Because in a situation like this, that's possibly pretty much your fault. All you have is yourself to blame, and you have to look into your internal resources. So the mind, the divine, and the clairvoyant techniques. I looked into those and started thinking about those to make sure that the money wasn't lost. I checked what astrological bodies were in my second and eighth house. I figured that the bodies in these houses would tell me more information about what happened, how it happened, and whether or not the situation was beyond my control or not. Because the second and eighth houses are money houses, and I'll tell you what type of money houses in a moment. When I checked, I peculiarly came across an astrology website that had not only planets but also a gang of asteroids that I had never known before. I was aware that there were millions of other heavenly bodies in the cosmos orbiting our sun, but I only saw a few ever documented and used in astrology. I jumped down that rabbit hole and learned a great deal of information really fast. The first website that I came to, and it was really peculiar that I came across a website to discover about asteroids. When like all of the astrology research that I've done, they talk about the planets, and they'll talk about maybe two asteroids. But Jessica Adams, I'll say it again, Jessica Adams, she's an astrologer. Her website talked about lots of different asteroids or dwarf planets. And I learned of 8 new asteroids / dwarf planets and their effects from her website. I was aware that one of the worst aspects in astrology was the opposition. That's when two planets are directly across from one another. There's a planet, the Earth, and then another planet. They're directly opposing one another. And that's what I look for firstly, an opposition. So I checked to see what was in direct competition for my second and eighth house. So I checked my second house first. And the second house is day-to-day personal possessions and value. So it's about money and even self-value and things revolving around value with the second house. So if you have an issue with that, you want to look into that and see what's going on there. And what was in my second house was the planet Saturn. The planet Saturn has moved into my second house. As for my birth chart, there's nothing in my second house. But now the planet Saturn has just moved into my second house. Neptune has been in my second house for a while now. So those two planets are there. And then there's 2 asteroids in my second house. One called Aesculapia, if I'm saying that right, or Aesculapia. And then there's another one called Panacea or Panacea. I'm not sure on how to pronounce these. And they're both in Pisces. Pisces is the ruler of my second house. So I assume that they have power over my finances, so they have influence over my finances. And when you Pisces is the first planet in my second house, and when you use whole sign astrology, whatever not planet, but whatever sign is in the first sign in a house is the sign that rules that house, and whatever planet rules that sign is the planet that rules that house. So Saturn was there. So through Saturn, I knew that Saturn was in my second house. It was transiting there. So I knew from that I had to spend money cautiously and really, watch what I do and don't waste money and know what I'm spending on. If you do that, it could really teach you on what you've been messing up on in the past, and really it's a good teacher, and it can help you even make more money in the future if you take those lessons and internalize them. And the other planet, Neptune, was there. And Neptune's about manifestation. And Neptune's about taking fantasy and turning it into reality. So it's definitely like a manifestation type of energy. But with Neptune, it's easy to get caught up in fiction or something that's not tangible. So it could help you, but if you don't know how to use it properly, it can hurt you. So you got to know how to use Neptune. And to be honest, I don't understand Neptune as thoroughly and as fully as I would like to. Now, the asteroid Aesculapia in my second house, it's in the 3rd degree. And, the 0, 1st, and 2nd degree are very, very, very powerful. Those first degrees are very, very powerful. This is my 3rd degree, so it's still somewhat powerful. But it's there, and it has a pretty good presence. And what it told me, it's in my second house, but what it represents is that something can make a phantom return or come back from the dead, so to speak. Now, there's a whole mythology about Aesculapia, but in a nutshell, that's what it kind of talks about when you look at the mythology of it. When I read that, I felt pretty good. It's like, whoa, that's good. Even though Saturn's difficulty, but I know I have been paying attention to my money, so I don't think Saturn's like going to be problematic because I'm really focused on it. I understand Saturn, and I am doing my best to work with it. So I know I'm doing that. So I figure that Saturn shouldn't be a threat to me. If anything, Neptune would be possibly an issue, but overall, I feel good about the effects that they have. So I don't feel that I don't feel overly pessimistic about the effect of Saturn and Neptune being in my second house. So also in my second house, there's the asteroid Panacea or Panacea, and what Panacea represents overall, Panacea has a quick fix or a cure-all energy. It's like something that you don't expect that can fix something, but it can easily fix it, but you didn't expect it, and then boom, it just makes things, it works. So this was even more good news for me, seeing these two asteroids in my second house. So I felt that, from that information, my second house was in relatively good hands. And then I checked my 8th house. My 8th house is directly across from my second house. And 8th house, it represents shared finances, taxes, investments. Basically money that isn't directly yours or money that you don't directly make. And what was in my 8th house, unlike my first house, there was no planets in my 8th house, but there were 2 asteroids. My second house, it was 2 planets, 2 asteroids. But my 8th house, only 2 asteroids. And 2 asteroids that are and were in my 8th house are called OPS, and Ceres. And all right, so knowing that my personal finances were strongly weighted by a responsibility planet, which was Saturn, which I just talked about, and an elusive, also a manifestation delusion planet, which is Neptune, I talked about earlier, and an elusive recovery asteroid that could bring things back from death, which was Aesculapia, and a quick fix asteroid being in my second house. I felt things were pretty good with my day-to-day money, and I felt comfortable that everything was good with that, and I at the very least I would not hit rock bottom. My opposing 8th house had 2 asteroids in it, and I figured that they have to be like a apocalyptic type of energy in order for me to like worry about them overtaking the opposing second house energy or challenging my second house energy. So let's see what those 2 asteroids were all about. Now the first asteroid that was in my 8th house that I found was called Ops. Now the energy of the asteroid Ops, in a nutshell, it explains something having difficult beginnings followed by promising endings. And when I saw this, it was a good sign. It was another positive thing. Difficult beginnings, but the ending should be pretty good. Should work out. And then the second asteroid that's in my 8th house and
was Ceres, Ceres, and it's related to nourishment, nourishing something and building it, growing it, and receiving and giving. Kind of think of a mother taking care of a child and building it and making the child stronger. It's also associated with losses and gains. So skiers, even though it's nourishing, I saw losses and gains. So that was the only thing that was really jump out at me as being kind of sketchy and possibly worrisome. But overall, everything looked very promising. So what I took from all of that was not considering any other aspect, not considering any squares or any trines. Squares like hard work or like negative, something that's going to be difficult, and you have trines, and there's other which is a positive aspect, and you have other positive aspects. Without considering those, this looked overall promising. It looked okay. It didn't look like there was like a big problem that could not be overcome or would not be fixed. So based on the astrology, I felt that this situation would relieve itself or rectify itself. So I felt comfortable after taking a look at that. It gave me a little bit of peace of mind. And the next thing that I looked at another art or type of divinity that could help me look into the situation beyond what I already knew. I read tarot. I pulled out my tarot cards and did some tarot readings for myself. And here's what I got. I'll show you my tarot cards that I pulled. And this card is the situation. This is what's going on with me. And this card is a clarification of this card, of what's going on with me. This card is the underlying issue. It's the underlying issue. And this card is the direction that everything is moving in. Like actually right now, what I'm waiting to find out. And this card is the end result, what's expected to happen. So I'll just run through these and tell you what's going to happen and what's supposed to happen based on this, what the energy is saying here. So here, this card is the Page of Cups. The Page of Cups, it's a page, so pages are kind of like a young person or a naive person, and cups is feeling good and it's upright, so that's a good sign. So it means maybe someone is naive or did some immature things, but it's you're gonna get good news and things should work out. That's what it looks like. And the reason for this is like the magician. This is the magician, and magician is like manifestation, and it's upside down, so manifestation is stuck. So I guess it's like a kind of like waiting on something big to happen that hasn't happened yet. And this card is the Judgment card, and Judgment card is a lot of times it's this is financial. So this time I'm waiting for something to return, something that belongs to me to return. And this card is upside down, so it's stuck. Something I'm waiting on is stuck or in limbo or something like that. And this card, this is the Seven of Coins, the Seven of Pentacles. And Seven of Pentacles is a card of waiting to reap the rewards of your labor. So right now I'm in this process of waiting to reap my rewards. And this card, this is the Five of Wands. Five of Wands is like tough petty battles. And this card is reversed, so it says that I can overcome these petty battles and have a sense of relief that all of this is all done and over. So this looks pretty favorable. Okay, now so let's talk more about Aesculapia. And remember, Aesculapia was the father of Panacea. Aesculapia was also like a miracle worker, a very, very good doctor or physician. So I'll give you more background information and mythology about Aesculapia so you can understand who this god or this person or how he is being personified. Now, the most dramatic healer in the horoscope is Aesculapia. The Romans set up temples to him where people would stay overnight hoping for a dream that would give them the diagnosis and cure or a miraculous recovery. As with most of their gods and goddesses behind our modern astrological symbols, the Romans imported him and made him Italian. In fact, they shipped him from Greece to cure the plague and believe he arrived in the form of a snake. So I just talked about Aesculapia. Aesculapia was the father of Panacea or Panacea. Panacea was the second asteroid in my second house. So it looks pretty good with that. They both were healers. So I have two healers in my second house. Remember, Aesculapia was a very, very famous healer. He was known to bring people back from the dead. He seemed like he could have some really miraculous, powerful, potent abilities in regards to being a healer. Now, Panacea is also related to medicine and healing things, but it's a little different. So I'm going to read this to you. It's from Wikipedia, but it gives you a lot of information and it gives you a little bit of mythology, but not as much as I would like for it to do so. All right, so Panacea, named after the Greek goddess of universal remedy, Panacea, is any supposed remedy that is claimed, for example, to cure all diseases and prolong life indefinitely. It was in the past sought after alchemists in connection with the elixir of life and the philosopher's stone, a mythical substance that would enable transmutation of common metals into gold. Through the 18th and 19th centuries, many patent medicines were claimed to be panaceas, and they became very big business. The term panacea is used in a negative way to describe the overuse of any one solution to solve many different problems, especially in medicine. The word was acquired connotations of snake oil or quackery. So it was like a good thing that ended up getting like a bad reputation. You know, something can work really good and everybody tries to use it for everything, but you know, some one thing can't always work for everything. It's kind of like one of those things, but it does work, I guess, for a specific reason that originally it was sought out for. Now, with mythology, Panacea was one of the daughters of the Greek god of medicine, Aesculapius, who I just talked about. So we have a father and a daughter, along with her four sisters, each of whom performed one aspect of healthcare. So here's Panacea's other sisters. Panacea had another sister called Hygeia, and she's related to hygiene, goddess of cleanliness and sanitation. And Iaso, the goddess of recuperation from illness, and Acesso, the goddess of the healing princess, and Aglia or Agel, the goddess of beauty and splendor. According to the mythology, Panacea had an elixir or potion with which she was able to heal any human malady, and her name has become interchangeable with the name of the cure itself. So that's a little background information on Panacea. It didn't go as deep into the mythology as I would like for it to have done, but I think this is enough for now. I may talk in depth about her and her chemistry with everyone else in the future. If you knew more about her relationships with her father and the other gods and goddesses, it would tell you what type of chemistry that she would have in a birth chart or in aspects that you were looking for in astrology. But hopefully this is good enough for the moment for you. So we've already talked about the two asteroids that were in my second house. Those two asteroids were Aesculapia, which was a great healer and also the father of Panacea. Panacea has the power of quickly fixing something or curing all of something. And so now we're going to go directly across the second house to the eighth house. And in my eighth house was Ops and also Ceres. Let's find out who Ops and Ceres are and what type of power that they had. And we can understand the dynamics and the relationships of these two gods with the other two gods that are in my second house. We can understand like how well everything's going to go down, or you know, if it's going to be good or bad. So let's go. In ancient Roman religion, Ops was a fertility deity and earth goddess of Sabine origin. Her sacred symbols include lions, the tambourine, a crown, grains, and the cornucopia. Ops and her husband were both children of Caelus and Terra. She was married to Saturn, and they had 6 children. Their 6 children was Jupiter, Neptune, Pluto, Juno, Ceres, and Vesta. So Saturn is in my 2nd house, and Saturn's wife, Ops, was in my 8th house. So they're directly opposing one another. So I guess we got to find out what the relationship between Ops and Saturn was like in order to see how this tug of war is going to work out. So let's just go into what happened. We're going to skip over like all the details of who Ops is and what Ops went through in her life. Let's just go get to the point about what happened in the end. Now, in the end, Saturn learned of a prophecy that stated that him and Ops' children would end up overthrowing him as a leader. So he ended up eating his children one by one after they were born, or he wanted to eat them. Ops, being the loving mother that she was, could not just stand by and let all of her children be eaten by her husband Saturn. So instead of feeding Saturn their final child, Jupiter, so he ate all of them except for Jupiter, she wrapped a rock in swaddling clothes and fed that to Saturn instead of Jupiter. Ops then went on to raise Jupiter and help him free his siblings from their father's stomach and overthrow their father. So they have a pretty strained relationship, Saturn and Ops do. So it's going to be a tug of war, but it looks like Ops was successful. So I guess Ops would keep Saturn in check. Saturn's a difficult planet, and it would neutralize Saturn's influence over the 2nd house. But overall, if Saturn is neutralized, then it looks pretty good. So I have to take from learning this that it looks like things would work out in my favor based on what I have learned here. We've talked about 3 different asteroids, and that represent gods, or they personify certain energies. Now, the last one we're going to talk about is Ceres, but there's another pronunciation. Some people pronounce it Ceres. The Ceres or Ceres name, the origin is Roman, and the parents of Ceres is Saturn and Ops. We've already talked about Saturn a little bit, and we talked about Ops because Ops was one of the gods or the players. The asteroids the asteroid was personified as. So we've already talked about Ops, and those Saturn and Ops are the parents. And if you remember, Saturn's in my 2nd house and Ops is in my 8th house directly across. So those two are opposing one another. Ops is the wife of Saturn, and if you remember the mythology, Ops and Saturn, they were of course husband and wife, but they had a problem with one another, and they ended up having to separate for whatever reason. So that tells you a lot about how these energies interact with one another when they come together, when they oppose, when there's an issue that they have to work together with. It tells you how they will manage that situation, and it gives you an idea of how those energies work together. So let's talk about Ceres or Ceres. So before I go in and talk about this, and as with all of the other stuff that I've talked about already and the other mythologies, the other asteroids, now as I read the information, understand that you should be filling in the blanks and converting symbolism to what it means in your own life, and also what it means in modern day. These mythologies are very old, and they apply to what was happening back then during those times. So you kind of have to extrapolate what happened back then with what's happening now. And you got to fill in a lot of blanks with this stuff. You got to do some thinking. It's an active thinking thing. So keep that in mind as you listen to my words. The story of agriculture is essentially the story of civilization. When our ancestors finally stopped chasing
food from one end of the world to the other and settle down and start growing their own food. It made everything that's great about modern life possible. Farming is a pretty complicated job, even these days, with the advantages of modern science and technology. So you can imagine that ancient people could have no idea why their crops failed sometimes. Surely there must have been someone or something controlling the fortune of the harvest. Well, for ancient Romans, that someone was Ceres, the goddess of agriculture. And keep in mind, we're talking about agriculture, and keep in mind, back then, agriculture was life. It was everything. So you got to kind of take that information. What does it mean today? What does it mean today? It could actually mean just directly what it is, agriculture, but it likely means so much more. Okay, so who is Ceres or Ceres? When we say that Ceres is the goddess of agriculture, that doesn't mean that she's the only one. In fact, many different gods and goddesses in the ancient Roman religion were linked to various aspects of agriculture. This goddess is, however, the only one to belong to the dei consentes. There are the 12 main gods and goddesses of Rome. Think of them as the A-team or the Avengers of the ancient Roman religion, and you'll have a clear idea of Ceres' standing. Ceres is a goddess of the common people. She doesn't just govern over agriculture, but also over fertility in general. So she's not about feeding people. She's also about being fertile and growing things, bringing things to life that may not be alive or may be struggling. Okay, much of what Ceres is responsible for concerns the daily lives of ordinary people, such as getting married and having children. She is officially the custodian of marriage laws, and violating those laws is therefore an affront to her. Gives you more information about Ceres' personality and how Ceres would interact with someone, based on these personality traits that we're seeing within her now. The goddess Ceres is an imported deity from the Greeks. Her counterpart on the Greek side of things is Demeter. So as you know, Greeks and Romans, it'll be the same god, but they'll have different names. And even if you go to other cultures, they'll have these same myths, and it'll be the same myth, but it'll be a different name for the same god, which is why it's so confusing today, and I think why it turns a lot of people away from it. And the mythologies of these goddesses are basically impossible to tell apart, except for the different names the Romans used for everyone. How does Ceres look? She's usually depicted as a woman wearing robes. She is not shown as being young and beautiful, but rather like motherly and caring. She is almost always holding a sheath of grain and sometimes has her breast bared as a symbol of motherhood. So it's a motherly, giving, sustaining type of energy. Now, family, Ceres' family. Ceres is the daughter of the gods Saturn and Ops. And if you remember, Saturn's in my second house, Ops is in my eighth house, right along with Ceres. So Ceres and Ops are together. Ceres is with her mother in my eighth house. And the father's, there's a problem with the father. The father's directly across in the second house. Saturn is god of many things. For example, time, hard work, reality checks, and responsibilities. The goddess of agriculture and fertility. So clearly, Ceres continued the family tradition. Family tradition was also on the agenda, apparently, when she had a daughter with her brother Jupiter. For gods of the ancient world, family relationships never stood in the way of marriage. So there's a lot of incest going on back in these stories and myths. And I don't know if to take them literally or what, but just more to look through and try to learn about and understand. The daughter's name was Proserpine, and she is the only child of Ceres, unless, of course, you choose to believe some accounts that say Ceres is also the mother of Liber or Libera, who are both fertility gods. Whether she is, in fact, their mother is, however, not clear. She has 3 proper siblings besides Jupiter in the form of Vesta, Neptune, and Pluto. So here's some history about Ceres, and we'll wrap it up here with the history. Ceres' lineage is clear as the daughter of Saturn and Ops, but of course, since she is essentially a renamed Demeter, which is just another name, I guess the Greek version. As goddesses of agriculture, many agricultural blessings are attributed to her. For example, the discovery of spelt wheat is said to have happened thanks to the goddess. Similarly, figuring out how to use oxen to plow fields and the actual plowing itself were her inventions. These were gifts that she gave to mankind in the same way that Prometheus gave humanity fire. So Ceres, it looks like Ceres finds a way to improve getting more food or getting more sustainability, whether that be food or whether that be something else that sustains you. The most famous story that Ceres features involves her daughter Proserpina. This is the same story that features Demeter, Persephone, and Hades in Greek mythology. And Hades is Pluto. I remember that one. Pluto, or Hades, sees Proserpina out and about and takes a liking to her. Now remember that Pluto is Ceres' full brother, which makes Proserpina his niece. In some accounts, Pluto falls in love with her. He falls in love basically with his niece because he's shot by Cupid's arrow. Cupid is another god or another asteroid, heavenly body. That Cupid's another one. I forget exactly his powers, but it's another one. Maybe we'll talk about him in the future. Which explains why he then kidnaps his niece and takes her down to the underworld. Ceres frantically searches for her daughter and forgets all about making the world fertile and nutritious. People begin to suffer, and Jupiter sends a message to his brother Pluto asking him to let Proserpina go. Pluto does this, but not before making Proserpina eat 6 underworld pomegranate seeds. This forces Proserpina to spend 6 months a year with her mother and 6 with her husband in the underworld. When Proserpina is away, Ceres cries, which is why we have winter and autumn for 6 months of the year. When her daughter comes back, Ceres gives us spring and summer. So that was some background information about Ceres. I didn't go in depth about the other ones, but maybe we can in the future. I think if I made it too long, it would just kill the video. So anyways, I hope you learned a lot from this, and thank you so much for listening.
So that's my video, and I hope you learned something from it. I didn't say it in the beginning, but I'll say it now. I love you all, and I appreciate you for watching. Now, you can take this information and apply it to your own self. Now, for example, right now, at this very date, you know, if you're watching now, if you're watching later at some other date, you'll probably have to double check and find where the placements are at that time for yourself. But right now in Pisces, we have Aesculapia and Panacea. So you could find out which house Pisces rules for you. Whereas Pisces, the house that Pisces is the first sign in, you could like apply that to that house for yourself with this information. And my other sign is Virgo. Now, you know, you could, in Virgo, there's Ops and there's Seers. So you could find out which house is ruled by Virgo and understand the power of how Ops and Seers is playing their roles in that part of your life. Again, if you're watching this video like way later in the future or something like this won't apply to you. You'll have to look this stuff up and, you know, apply it to yourself if the asteroids have left the signs that I'm talking about now. So anyway, I hope you learned some things. I hope you can apply them, and I hope they're beneficial to you. I hope you took something from these things. So I'm about to go to bed and about to turn this light off. You know how I don't like lights, artificial lights, but I wanted to finish my video up. So y'all take it easy. I love you all, and I'm gone. I'm out.